Brian Kavanagh, as I said, is the Chief Executive of Horse Racing Ireland, who had a lengthier period of behind closed doors racing before lockdown occurred in that country. Brian, good morning.
Morning, Nick.
How are you, most importantly?
Grand, thanks. Lovely to hear from you, and lovely that you have a programme on again. Yeah, no, we're good. Everyone in the same boat, really.
And to be honest, probably not too much to say since we last spoke, but the obvious question, what are you getting from the Irish government as to what your programme to get back on the road might be?
Well, as you probably know, the country is fully in lockdown until May the 4th, so 2 weeks tomorrow, and that will have been 6 weeks since we had our last race meeting. And it's entirely a medical matter, Nick, at that point. It's up to the Chief Medical Officer and the government authorities. They've been really supportive of us all through the process. They encouraged us to keep racing behind closed doors before the full shutdown, and they've been very helpful to keep the breeding industry going during this full lockdown. So breeding horses, training horses were specifically listed in the list of essential services that could continue during the lockdown. The government, obviously it will be guided by the medical officers. We've told them we're racing ready. We'd like to get back when it's appropriate and when it's safe to do so, and we can get back, behind closed doors at reasonably short notice. Very hard to put a date on that, but certainly I would say the government's policy on this with regard to racing and indeed all other industries has been to try wherever they can to keep things going if it's a safe situation to do so. So we're in constant contact with them, and next week will be a critical week in terms of trying to establish how we're going forward. So
they're giving you a very clear idea that if the curve really does start to flatten in Ireland and really does start to drop off quite markedly, that you would be amongst the first industries to be back in the game.
We would hope so. As I said, I think there was some speculation during the week about golf and racing being two activities that are different perhaps from other activities. That said, the government here has been very cautious and very competent really in the way they've addressed the issue, and we've followed the medical advice all the way through the process, and we will continue to do so. But there's a lot of different aspects to it. I think the 10 meetings which we had behind closed doors, will stand to us. We had a lot of learnings, and I think people did see that it could be done in a safe manner. I would echo the points that Graham was just making there in terms of, you can never do enough. You can look at every process and find ways to improve it, and we've been doing that. So I think that those meetings will stand to us, hopefully coming back, and we've indicated that, we will be prepared to race behind closed doors for as long as the government currently has a policy on mass gatherings out of doors. Before the lockdown, there was no mass gatherings of more than 500 people.
Yeah.
So clearly, until that policy changes, if you are back racing, you'll be racing behind closed doors.
Are you at the moment looking at when racing resuming with the programme that you were intending to race with, or are you going to significantly revise your programme?
At the moment, we haven't changed the dates for the Irish Classics, which I think is probably the first key decision to take. Obviously, we would have lost 6 weeks racing, including 2 major festivals at Fairyhouse and Punchestown, and we've said what we'll do about them in the autumn. With regard to the flat side of things, at this point, and if you were to resume soon after the 4th of May, I think you could still run the Classics on their scheduled dates, which are the 23rd and 24th of May. That's important because if you don't have to change them, then it doesn't have a knock-on effect on the other Irish Group 1 races later in the year. If we didn't come back immediately after the 4th of May, you then probably would have to look at moving back those Classics to allow time for a prep run and things like that, and that does have knock-on effects.
And they presumably, Brian, then would be restricted to horses trained in Ireland?
I don't know about that. I think that's something we need to look at. We've continued to have movement of mares between Britain, Ireland and France, during the lockdown under strict protocols. And I think we'd like to examine ways in which you could look at whether you could apply similar protocols for racehorses as well. I mean, I think that's the same issue for all other countries, France, Germany and Britain. We spoke on a conference call on Monday, and they're all looking at the same issue. In order to uphold the pattern, you need international competition. It may be that won't come immediately, but I think we would very much like to look at protocols whereby you facilitate that.
Brian, thank you very much.